Hello, I'm very happy to be here with you today on the celebration of the 30 years of the TD Charte of 1994. In that context, we are doing a huge symposium in Zurich, Paris, about transdisciplinarity and economy and management. I'm very proud to introduce you Professor Mathias Schüz, that is Emeritus Professor and Doctor of Philosophy of the University of Applied Science in Zurich. Professor, could you tell us a little bit about your path in university?
Yes, it's a long path because beforehand I was 20 years in industry. Originally, I studied not only philosophy but also physics, and my doctorate was about the philosophical consequences of quantum physics. And after this, writings and promotion, I started my career at IBM. First, I was a trainee, and then I became a key account manager. And afterwards, I was got the opportunity. I was invited by an industry insurer, privately owned by the owner, and he wanted me to engage or to build up a sort of academy for risk research, which I did then with his son. He became who inherited the whole company after 3-4 years. So his father really wanted me with his son to develop the succession of the ownership. And later, the academy became a tool of leadership of this whole huge group when his father passed away. And the idea was to really change the whole corporate culture towards more sustainability. And this was end of the 80s, to be honest. And we started with the idea of really that a company has much more responsibility than just developing or deliver huge profits, but also to take on responsibility for social, for the society, and also mainly for nature and for future generations, which we did. And this was very successful, the whole cultural change, everything. But then one of his top manager made a strategic mismanagement, or let's say he falsified due diligence reports to buy a reinsurer in America. And that was the beginning of the end of a 100 years old company, because he had faced with losses of more than 4 billion euros. So he had to sell the whole company. This was the end of my career in industry. I started an own consulting firm, which I still have, but also my career at the universities again. And it was the Zurich University of Applied Sciences, where I became lecturer and researcher in strategic management first, then responsibility, business ethics, where I published several books. And now, after meditation of my career, I started also Transdisciplinarity book series at Springer Nature. And the first volume is just finished and is going to be published in the next weeks. And
What is
book
the
series,
title, Professor? What is the title of
the title of the book series is Transdisciplinary Management of Social and Ecological Crises. So whatever you can contribute here, you can provide a book, an anthology, or a monography, or whatever. And I will show it in the presentation how the book title looks like. So you are really invited to use our book series at Springer Nature.
Thank
So
you.
that is more or less the situation.
Very interesting, because it is a transdisciplinary path through economy, quantum physics, and philosophy. So we're very happy today to have as well Professor Cristina Elena Popataci, who is president of the International Institute for the Analysis of Legal and Administrative Change, associate professor in the International Public Law and Communication and New Technology Law, and co-president of IG, international business and human rights advisor in ESIL Diversity Advisory Body, researcher at CIRED Paris, editor-chief of the International Investment Law Journal of a Jurist, and deputy editor at Taylor and Francis and Springer Nature. So that will ask maybe some questions to our Professor Mathias Schüz. So Professor, you have about 25 minutes, and then we open for the questions. Is it okay for you?
Yes, it's okay. I just try to upload you. I'm not a co-host. I don't know how I can upload
okay.
slides.
So I'm allowing partager l'écran. Normally, you are allowed to share your screen. Is it okay?
Yes, but I have to look where it is. Let me see. You cannot see it yet, I
No,
think.
we cannot see it yet.
Yeah, because sharing, this is always a problem. Perhaps you can stop the record that we install that. That is what I wanted to. Yes, I'm going to speak a little bit about the idea of responsible leadership, not only in business, but also in society and also politics, whatever. And my thesis is that responsible leadership is a transdisciplinary challenge. And this I have to explain because there are several main terms to be discussed or to explain what means responsibility, what means leadership, what sort of leadership models we should provide in order to be responsible leadership, or let's say holistically responsible leaders. And this is what I'm going to explain now. Regarding my own experience in education, I already gave an introduction, so I can jump over this slide. And some book publications. This is my first book, which I did out of my quantum physical reflection, philosophical reflection of quantum physics, and some other books. And the last one is that about applied business ethics, which exists also in English. And this is the from the first volume of the Transdisciplinary Management Ecological Crisis. First volume. I found 20 authors, and the topic is transdisciplinary thinking and acting, fundamentals and perspective. It has a theoretical and a more practical part. So this is summarized here. And I would like to start why leadership, why responsible leadership is so urgently demanded in our world. There are ecological reasons for responsible leadership, which is symbolized here. The biosphere integrity is threatened by activities of humankind, which is summarized here. I don't go into the detail. And the idea is that we have also different leadership styles worldwide. We have the augmentation of autocracies versus democracies. And I quote Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel, what is the meaning of right? We should have a right which protects the majority, and the right protects the freedom of the majority against the despotism of the few. And what we find as well, in contrast, the right of the strongest protects the arbitrariness of the few at the expense of the majority. So really, that is a challenge which we are politically faced with worldwide. Democracy is decreasing, autocracies are increasing, and we don't know why people really strive for the one and avoid the other. Because we have these world problems. We have social world problems and we have ecological world problems. And obviously, democracies contribute to both of these spheres as well. So some mean going to the other side, this might help and support to solve these problems. And there's an issue. From my perspective, I think responsible leadership might be the right one, but we should understand what a responsible leader should really provide. Okay, let's start. What means the right in the market, in the business? It's on the market. There is a meeting of an ego. This is me, meet someone else, and we want to exchange. Exchange is the basis of any business activities, and as we know also of all social activities, whenever we exchange ideas, values, whatever, there's a sort of exchange process. It's not possible that you exploit only the one and just don't give something back. So to exchange means you give something, you get something back. And the idea is of exchange that both sides have the same profit. They sacrifice something and want because they strive for a certain added value, and both sides must profit from. There's a balance of giving and taking. If you took more than you gave, then we won't call that exchange, but we call that deception and robbery, which is pure egotism. And while we gave more than we took, then we called that altruism or gift and charity. So we can see that social activities in business is the middle path between robbery and charity. We can also link it with political ideas. Democracies should go more to the altruistic part, while the autocracies are more on the left part. There's a big problem. So what we can learn, what is fair exchange is the balance of giving and taking. And we can also ask our question, why we want that? Because we don't want to be exploited on the market. And we understood if we treat the others similarly as we want to be treated, if we don't want to be ripped off, then we don't rip off the other. This is for both parties better, for all exchange parties better. So we see already that ethics is involved even in business. That is the original idea. It's a special part of ethics based on the golden rule of ethics. But to provide fair exchange on the market, we need more than that. We need three main ethical approaches. There is a utilitarian approach, which focuses on the consequences. There's a duty ethical approach, which focuses on certain rules and respecting rights. And also we should provide a sort of virtuous behavior, which means every exchange partner, or let's say every merchant, the honorable merchant, should provide a certain character. We need, as we will see a little bit later, all the three because they complement each other. Each approach has certain strengths, but also weaknesses. And in order to compensate the weaknesses, we need all the three. I will explain a little bit later. What we can learn in business history, economics and politics belong together because the politics should provide, or let's say, protect the interests of the majority of the interests of the public, and it should also protect then the market against the robbers, which might take place. But politics should provide fairness on the market, but without knowing what fairness means, it cannot really protect it. Therefore, ethics is the third discipline which we should add here, and they are belonging together, as we know from Aristotle, who says this is the basis of practical philosophy. But the point is that latest in the 19th century, economics is just watching out for money retention, want to be unleashed from the other two disciplines. Politics is striving more for power retention, unleashed from other issues, especially from ethics. And ethics goes to the university and wants just knowledge retention. And but we know the combination of politics in economics end of the 19th century leads to a sort of politics providing laws which really protects the capital and the rich, and really does not anymore protect the poor people. Katharina Pistor, the great professor of law at Columbia University, published it with the Code of the Capital, how law creates wealth and inequality. This is a problem which leads also to the huge gap between democracies and autocracies and the frictions in our society. Okay, what means responsibility? We see there's a transdisciplinary issue behind responsibility itself. We know from philosophical reflection that responsibility has a certain structure. It is based on at least 3 points. There is a sort of leader who, whatever he decides, causes consequences, and these consequences have to be justified towards authorities. And according to the way how he responds, he will be evaluated or judged. So responsibility is a 3-point relationship, and it has to be thought through whenever we make a decision and plan consequence. We should also reflect those who are affected by these consequences. This is very important. This means if you reflect the total responsibility you should reflect, you should see all consequences, besides the intended, also the unintended consequences, and all possible affected authorities or stakeholders. And that means that is a sort of, let's say, matrix. And we can really summarize the formula for total responsibility, that you have to sum up all these consequences and all authorities. And that means this is not possible. The limitation of our consciousness does not allow to overview all consequences and all possible affected. And that means there's a huge limitation for that. And that might be a reason why in business, in disciplines, in disciplinary work, in sciences, they try to reduce complexity. And the reduction of complexity in business was the famous dictum of Milton Friedman, who says, don't focus your responsibility as an enterprise on one thing. Social responsibility for you is just to increase your profit. That is a huge reduction of one-dimensional idea. We know that the shareholder value idea behind was lost, latest with the Enron and WorldCom disasters and the falsification of balance sheets, etc., at the beginning of 2002, 2003, and it was a huge stock market crash, and we know this is not anymore possible. So between the two extremes, total responsibility versus one-dimensional responsibility, we should find a path through, and that is state of the art now. Is really I will just show you the middle path, and I link now the 3 ethical approaches which I already mentioned. When we reflect the consequence, we have an approach we call utility ethics. If we think about certain authorities in business, in ethics, we have duty ethics, but also virtue ethics, which try to influence the character of leaders towards more responsibility. So what is the middle path in responsibility? The middle path is really that what we call the structure of triple corporate responsibility, and we can transfer that also on responsibilities for politicians, for lay people, for everyone. This is really clear. We need these 3. Why? Because this is fundamental for our existence. We have a triple responsibility. We should provide technical or economic responsibility. We should provide ethical responsibility or social responsibility. And last not least, also aesthetic responsibility, or as I will explain a little bit later, what might this mean, responsibility ecologically. So all these 3, there's a lot of discussion going around. Is that a trade-off? Is there aim conflict behind? And I think, yes, as long you are robbing somewhere, as long you are a robber, let's say in the ecological dimension, you think whenever I invest here, it reduces my profit. That is a trade-off. That is a conflict of aims. But this is not true. Only these profits are acceptable when I have fair exchanges in the ecological area, that I exchange fairly with nature. Whatever I take, I should give back. When I exchange fairly in the social dimension. This means whenever I treat someone, I should provide him also something. When he gives something for me, we should really treat our stakeholders fairly. And then the profit comes out of all these exchange processes along the value creation chain. Then I could say, this is a profit which I can really keep in order to reinvest for innovation, etc. So that is the challenge. The challenge is that we don't see all these consequences in these three dimensions. It's endless, so to say. And therefore, we cannot just rely on disciplinary focusing. We should really think also transdisciplinarily. I will explain a little bit later what does this mean for responsible leadership qualities. So, self-regulation, we should really think responsible leader is directed not only at employees, followers, but also at all stakeholders to the greater whole of nature, for the sake of the greater whole of nature, and social and society, I can add. And every stakeholder, even nature, even all living beings within nature, they strive for fair exchange. It's quite interestingly, in nature, there's a huge balance of giving and taking. So whenever the balance is disrupted, then we have a crisis. And this is the point. We should balance it out. No one should really just be exploited. It should be in balance. And this means that we think about transdisciplinary approaches that can responsibly provide problem solutions for a healthy relationship between leaders and their stakeholders, nature, and the living beings there included. That is the challenge. How can we see that? I have developed an own model, a transdisciplinary model of responsible leadership. I made also some empirical research, what brings people to huge good careers. And I understood that good leaders are not only doers, they are also coordinators, they are also visionaries. And when you look at board members of huge companies, we see there is a division of labor. There's one who, the CEO is the typical visionary. The chief of staff is the guy who really looks for coordination, integrating all different stakeholders. And there's a COO who really is able to construct technically, surmount the problems there. So I start with these three fields, and we can see what sort of capabilities a good responsible leader should provide. This means you should, first of all, as a technical leader, having the competence of knowing how, serves the objectives, he is management by objectives, he does the things right based on cognitive intelligence. So this is supportive here. And secondly, we have the ethical leader who has the competence of knowing whom, serves the people, respects the stakeholders as partners, and he should provide a sort of emotional, ethical, or social intelligence. We call that EQ. You know, Daniel Goleman defined that. But last not least, for the ecological dimension, we need spiritual leaders. He has the competence of knowing why, serves the ideas, does the right things, integrates the parts into the whole, and he should provide spiritual, aesthetic, or intuitive intelligence. And as you can see, we need them. They complement each other. The more these are balanced, the better you can really provide solutions for our challenges of nowadays. This is important to understand. If you look at the technical leader, he should really provide all that what we learn in business schools. And I don't want to go into this here, but I want to show what sort of competencies you should provide to being able to fulfill all these three leadership models. And I refer to the program of virtues, 100 virtues from project, the Virtues Project, the Canadian couple, psychotherapy couple, you might know her, then Popov. They have developed these 100 virtues and a whole program how to educate people from the kindergarten up to enterprises, how to integrate or to develop these virtues. For me, a virtue is a disposition for behavior. The typical dispositions for behavior. We learn from Aristotle how we can develop it and what we should think about. But just shortly, I want to say a technical leader, he should really provide these issues, that he can do all these tasks of management, and he can, for example, he should provide accountability and many other virtues, which are these virtues are part of the virtues of 100 virtues of virtue projects. And we should really develop these, which can be developed also through life, through schooling, through business schools, whatever, but it's everywhere lacked, it's still lacking. But the ethical leader, he needs to understand how can I bridge the gap between me and the other, between egotism and altruism? How can I integrate different belief systems? How can I integrate diversity, which is symbolized here in this? And that is a huge challenge as well. And otherwise, we cannot foster heterogeneous groups within a company to develop solutions of our world problems. That is very important. And we can see ethical virtues, which are summarized here, which we can focus on to develop. And justice is a very important one here. And thirdly, the spiritual leader, he should really be sensible for our planet, but also our inner world within us. We have a huge universe within us. And also, he should really see the opportunities, to grasp the opportunities by the forelock. In ancient Greece, this was the god Kairos. The Kairos is the god who is symbolized here on this picture on the right. He flies, he comes very quickly. If you are too slowly to grasp the opportunity, to grasp the forelock of the Kairos, who has only hairs on the front side, but the back side is bold, you just glide down and the opportunity is gone. Therefore, these three competences you should provide as a spiritual leader. And I selected out of these 100 these virtues which we should develop. Mindfulness is a very important one and became a fashion in business world now. Many companies provide mindfulness programs based on Kabat-Zinn, etc. I have here the card of mindfulness defined by Popov-Ehr and also Kabat-Zinn, which means that you focus on the here now, that you see with all your senses what is going on here, and that you feel also with your senses what's going on within you. Our consciousness selects huge amount of information. We can just hold up we can process around 60 bits per second with our consciousness, but we know that we have more than 10 million bits per second processed within us, our subconsciousness. A huge amount of information which lies within us. We can use this information to solve problems which we haven't solved yet. So innovation, inspiration, everything comes from it. But for this, we have to be mindful towards our inner and outer world. So what hinders us to become responsible leaders in these three dimensions, to act for well-being of the whole? We know that time pressure, memory effects, information overflow, lack of meaning, all these cognitively biased brain. We know all that from Manoogian, who found 188 cognitive bias. You can see that, and he defined it, what it means. And within organizations, there is huge social pressure from your boss, from the lived corporate culture. They press you, let's say, towards shareholder value. Then you blind out all these necessary solutions which might be necessary to solve problems towards the whole. All that hinders us. And that is the way why we need transdisciplinarity. And I developed a known model for transdisciplinarity, which I also presented and described in my first volume. I just summarize here. The consciousness, the development of our discipline stems originally from magical worldview and mythical worldview. Out of this, in ancient times, the conceptual world approach started with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And we know that the paradigm of modern conceptual world approach pioneers Galilei, Bacon, Descartes, that led to the ecological problems we are faced with. So there is a clear line from there to the ecological crisis of nowadays, from enlightenment. The problem of enlightenment of modern times is the idea, let's say, the demand of domination of man over nature, the domination concept. With conceptual world approach, we start to dominate, to exploit, to press out whatever is around us instead of being partner of it. That is a huge challenge. Therefore, we need, I call it horizontal disciplinary approaches, that we have all these disciplines, scientific disciplines, which have to be multidisciplinarily in a common way applied for problem solution. But that is not all. We need also, I call it the vertical approach, which means we should go back to the origin of being and to understand the condition of the possibility of the universe, but also the condition of the possibility of all these disciplines. We should integrate it in a transcendental approach. And there I have summarized this approach here. And that is the challenge of responsible leadership as well, that we should keep that in mind. We cannot just rely on disciplines. We should rely on experiential knowledge of people who worked for decades, of, we call it indigeneality of, let's say, people who are still within the nature. Instead of destroying them, we should know of, let's say, Native Americans' knowledge. Or in India, there are so many old villages and small villages, even the Himalaya. They have a knowledge which is not disciplined by our conceptual world approach. We should learn from them and to integrate that. That is my idea of solving the problems with holistically responsible leadership. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Professor. It was brilliant. I think Professor Christina Papatache has two questions, and I just have one question. So we'll start with Christina.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Professor, for your amazing and particularly useful presentation. I noticed in your presentation a heading for the School of Management and Law. Yes. So I cannot miss the opportunity to ask you something. Do you believe that in the future of transdisciplinarity, there will also be transdisciplinarity in law? Is there
in law,
perhaps
in law,
in
you
law,
asked it,
in law?
In law, yeah, sure. Yeah, that is a very interesting question, I have to say. One should really provide a book about transdisciplinary lawmaking or whatever, because law is a product of ethics, to be honest. First, we have an ethical reflection of what should we do and what we should not do. And then we have two paradigms. We have the Anglo-Saxon case law system, which is an inductive system. We have cases, and out of these cases with problems, and out of these problems, we define solutions in certain laws, and then it becomes a law. While we have the, let's say, the continental or Roman law system, which is deductive. We have certain principles, and out of these principles, we derive all laws which become more and more specific. Let's say human rights. This is the basic, and out of human rights, we develop, we deduct different laws. So it's quite interesting. They are complementary. We need both. The one is more utilitarian, and the other one is more duty ethically. And so, thinking about transdisciplinarity in lawmaking, we should really reflect what is beyond law, because laws can just focusing on certain cases in the Anglo-Saxon or principles in the continental one. But beyond human rights, we have to think about what is the right of a plant. Has a plant a dignity? Interestingly, the constitution of Swiss, the Swiss constitution has provided a biocentric approach. In Article 120, it's clearly stated you have to protect the dignity of creation, which integrates also plants. So that is interesting in this way.
I'm so happy about your opinion. And I am very happy because the Swiss Constitution recognizes the nature rights. This is so important. But the last curiosity I have, is there perhaps a hierarchy of disciplines that might facilitate the absorption of transdisciplinary more easily? What do you
Is there one discipline you ask?
Yes.
Yes, sure. Sorry, did you ask, is there one discipline which fosters transdisciplinarity? Yeah, sure,
Yes.
quantum physics. Therefore, yeah, that is the idea. My doctorate was about the philosophy of quantum physics. And interestingly, Bazarat Niculescu really focused on the same issue. I followed the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics, and they stated also that the principle of the excluded middle is really not valid anymore in quantum physics. It's the principle of included middle, and this means there is no either or. There is as well as well. So you cannot say it's either true or false, because especially in quantum physics, we know it depends on the way how you ask nature, it responds differently. It responds either as a wave or it responds as in the form of particle, which is contradicting in our logic. It's not an either or, it's as well. Depends on the way how you experiment with the nature. So things like that. Therefore, I think the most disciplines still have not reflected the outcome of quantum physics. So that can be fostered if we really understood what does chemistry, for example, for biology, how they interpret a biological system is still a scandal, because they still argue like René Descartes argued, let's say the genes are like machines, and if you exchange certain genes, then you can exchange people, or the brain is consciousness is just a product of our neurons. So that is a very materialistic approach. They are still in the 19th century. They have not yet understood what quantum physics really means. What does matter really means? An atom, which is a construct of our consciousness and has nothing to do with the real world. There are many, many dimensions which we cannot understand now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll try to express myself the best as I can, Professor. It's a delicate question. You show us 100 of virtues, then you show us 100 of bias.
Yes.
So as to not be binary in our approach, I study the unintentional, the bias, the unintended, and the conscious of the bias.
Sure.
And the conscious of the unintended. And I think there is no real virtue work if we do not work on ourselves, because we all have bias, and
Sure.
the bias will appear, and we have to teach people not in one hand the virtues, in the other hand the bias, but in a dynamic that is non-binary. We have in ourselves a dynamic in between what we show for good reasons. I mean, we don't want to show a bad image of ourselves, so it is intention. It is an intentional bias. We prefer to show what is the best of us. But we also has bias, unconscious bias, an unintentional bias, as shame, fear, disgust, so we have to work with this non-intentional material
Very
us
good.
to go to virtue behaviors. And
Yes, but
it's a never-ending story, it seems to me.
absolutely. This
So
is
go
absolutely.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I thought you were
No,
finished.
no, go ahead. This is my
No,
question.
you're totally right. This is a myth.
Go beyond a binary approach in between virtue and bias in your presentation.
There's a misunderstanding of what is a virtue. If you really read carefully what Aristotle means of a virtue, virtue is nothing binary. It's just a concept to explain a sort of muscle of behavior or thinking or of our body. It's body has muscles. So if it's a potential for development, but how you develop it depends on your individuality, which is unique. So a virtue for you, courage, let's say courage for you is something else than for me, because you have to find the gold mean between two extremes. What means recklessness? Too much. This is a
Perfect. Ethic of Aristotle, the middle path in between
it's the
excess.
middle, but the point is the middle path is for everyone different, because we have different abilities, and and we are living in different situations that are called capability. So capabilities depend on our situation and our abilities, and to develop what means for me courage. You know, I was practicing martial arts for 40 years, and I had an own school, taekwondo, etc. So for me, virtue means courage means totally differently than for you. Because if I in a situation I see someone is attacked and I'm trained for that and do not intervene physically, that would be
You may be surprised that I did martial arts as well.
As well.
Yes.
What have you done? What have you done?
Box. I've Thai box and English box.
Wow. And I did that for more than 40 years. And I have then we have that similarly. But even for you, it's different to intervene than for me. So we have to reflect that individually. And that is interesting. Why virtues are not binary. That is a complex of potential we have to develop for behavior. And we can train that. It's a continuous improvement process. It engraves our character our whole life. It's never-ending story. You're totally right. And the unintended consequence, the unintended biases, there are also emotional biases. There are biases, physical biases. We cannot fly. We cannot, because there's gravitation. It's also biased. Our whole brain is adapted to gravity. So when we try to overwind that with technology, that's the one. But perhaps we can develop our spirit that we can fly in another dimension. We don't know that. Things like that we know from yogis in India.
Yes, I'm a yoga teacher as well.
Me too. I've been practicing Zen and yoga for decades.
Yes, that's very interesting, because yoga, it's not enough. We need martial arts. Martial arts is not enough. We need yoga.
Exactly.
It's a balance between give and take.
Exactly.
For our bodies. We need to meditate. We need to
absolutely
stretch, but we also need to fight. And there is an interesting point. I mean, we need, I would say, in a virtual way, we need compassion, but we need justice. So we need the compassion of forgiveness, of care, of solidarity, of mutual understanding. But we need justice, and we need to fight for some values. We cannot stay only on compassion, but we cannot, on the other hand, stay on justice, judging all the time. And
absolutely good.
There we are in the transdisciplinary movement with what I wanted to show the people who is listening to us, that pay attention. We are in a movement. We are in a movement of building ourselves, never-ending story. That doesn't mean that we transdisciplinary people will have the truth and the good virtues and that we don't have bias. We do have our bias, But the difference between someone who is with bias intentionally and someone who is biased unintentionally is that we are working on our bias. We are trying to see them and working on them.
Absolutely.
And that's the only difference. That does not mean that transdisciplinary people is good and the others are bad. No, we are good and bad, intelligent for good and for evil as well. But we know it and we work on it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And the point is really we should activate our impartial spectator within us. And that we do in meditation, for example, also in martial arts, by the way. The impartial spectator, by the way, this term stems from Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a great mindfulness theoretician. Most people don't know. He was not only the inventor of modern economics reflection, but he was a great psychologist. And the impartial spectator within us, we can get in distance to our thoughts, our feelings, our breath, and even to our body. And that links us with the ground of our soul, we can say. Then we are beyond disciplines, because all disciplines are based on concepts. And concepts is a certain form of gripping to something which is endless and making it finite, reducing it with our methodology. And that means we should go beyond the methodologies we have with our disciplines. And that is only possible when we become when we unified ourselves with our impartial spectator within us. Kant would say transcendental subject, or we could say with our unconsciousness, Carl Gustav Jung, or our higher self or superego, whatever. And then we could also say, as a mystics, we become unified with God or whatever. Yes. So that is the challenge.
So that will be our conclusion, Professor.
I can say yes. Very good.
Yes. Would you like to say a last word, Professor?
Yes, the last word is really responsible leadership is not only in business, there I'm specialized in, but responsible leaders we need in all, let's say, segments of societal expressions, in our associations, in our communities, in politics, in NGOs, whatever. Being able to see with these three forms of the technical sides, we have a social side and we have a spiritual side. And spiritual intelligence, Dana Zohar and Marshall, they have developed a set of abilities we can develop, we can work on that. And meditation, for example, is one great training program to develop these things.
So thank you so much, Chris. Professor Chris Papatashi, would you like to say a last word?
Yes, of course. I would like to thank you both once again for your great presentation. It was great to see you today, and I was very inspiring, and I learned a great deal. I hope you have. I will have the opportunity to discuss further in the future, and I wish you much success in upcoming projects. Of course, when I wish you this success, I including a little part with our book project. Thank you very much. Goodbye and all the best.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.